Coach Show.
It's Wednesday afternoon, beautiful day and cloudy weather outside here in Cleveland, but that's okay. We've got warm sunshine just coming from Tony and bathing us in his positive attitude every single day.
That's what I'm here for.
I know. That was in the job description.
Yep,
it's just a ray of constant sunshine.
When I saw that, I knew this was for
this. Yeah, I get it. You connect with that.
Yep.
So we've got our SaaS Coach Show, doing this every Wednesday. We've got a series on retention. How do you keep users? I keep saying the bear hug. I love that. The user bear hug. How do you keep them held? And because if we want to grow our software companies, what we really have to do is make sure we reduce churn and increase retention, so that the effort and the money that we put into marketing and gaining new customers isn't wasted. And it's really about increasing that lifetime value of every conversion that we get. And this retention piece is a huge part of that cycle of trying to grow a software business.
Yeah, and this series, kind of like the last one where we talked conversion, everything kind of builds off of one another.
100%.
So starting out, we talked about the onboarding experience. We talked about making a product that's sticky. We talked about a number of other things. We talked about data, and we talked about customer service, road mapping, all that. I think that ties into what we're going to go into today, and that is, want to tell them?
Yeah, so we got to figure out who the captain, the person that's going to steer the ship when it comes to retention. So who's in charge of retention? You?
I thought
me,
it was you.
You? And that's how most software companies look, is that, are you really tying someone to say part of your role is retention and thinking about that, or even that is your role is to constantly be thinking about how we retain users. We've got people on staff maybe for marketing, and it's their pure job to spend every day thinking about how do we get more people into our funnel, how do we close more people. But on the reverse side, there's not a lot of companies that have a czar that's really, their job is every day focused on how do I keep users in our system. So that's what we're looking for, is who's the czar?
Yeah.
Emperor, captain, president.
Love it.
Any other words?
No, I just, czar, okay. I'm sitting here thinking, can I get my title changed here?
We can work on that.
Okay, sounds good. I think the point here is all about accountability, having ownership. And if nobody is, specifically has that, in their job description, that here's what I'm going to be doing, is I'm responsible for leading the team to ensure retention, ensure those users keep coming back. It falls by the wayside. Someone has to own it. And so how do you do that? I think you have to figure out a way to do that in an organization. Doesn't mean everything falls on that person, but someone has to be looking at those numbers and thinking about all those different touch points and how to improve along the way.
So basically what you're saying is someone has to bear hug retention so that the software can bear hug users.
There we go. It keeps coming back.
I'm going to keep bringing that back around. So, some of the stats say a 10% increase in retention can increase the company's value by 30%. And if you're looking at going out and raising funds, or eventually exiting, or generally just driving profit so that you can scale growth, retention is one of those numbers that, multiple factor increase if you're able to make changes in retention. And again, you see that across the board. And I mean, even when you're looking at selling or raising capital, that idea of are you retaining customers is an indicator for smart investors on whether the company has long-term value and can grow. And if an investor comes in and they see a product that's in its early stages and 70% of users are leaving within the first week and not paying or whatever it might be, that's obviously a concern for what is the true value of the software to the market, and is there some sort of mismatch, and do they need to pivot on their idea, or is there just something wrong with what they've done? And that needs to be figured out. And so retention is one of those numbers that early on you need to think about, and then as you're growing the company, you need to spend a lot of effort and time on.
Yeah, and that's retention isn't always looked at as like that big sexy thing to track up front, like the sales side is, like, new customers and that. However, it's such an important business metric. What is the value that your software is providing to the user base, and what's more important than that? I mean, so retention speaks to that. So if you have investors, someone looking at your business, that's a really telltale sign, either the value or the way it's communicated or something, but it's tied to that, and fundamentally just an important number to be looking at.
I agree. And so the first part is, who really owns retention, and is that defined in an organization? We have chief revenue officers, and a software company with the level of importance in this should have a chief retention officer, that's really focused on that, or at least someone in a role that's a significant chunk of their job description is to lead the team and build a team. And so it's not even just the person that owns it, but what's the supporting team look like when we're talking about building out retention? And that could be your customer service people, that can be part of the development team, and maybe someone that's specifically focused on retention within the development team. But again, someone that's a leader that's strategically thinking across product development, customer experience, roadmap, all of these different things, even funding, and how that is all going to flow into and factor to how we drive retention. And again, I think that as I talk to companies in the software space, that is just a role that rarely exists, is someone that's fully focused on, how do we think about and capture more retention.
So who do you think it naturally falls on, or is a good fit for that, to be tracking and kind of held responsible for looking at those retention numbers?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. I think, a leader of a product team could be someone that either gets spun out into that, or that becomes a part of their role. So you've got a product manager or someone that's truly leading product development. But there's also others, the CEO, if it's young, that's something that they can do. But as you grow the software company, I do think you have to look at bringing in a resource from probably a previous firm that again has the experience of product development, has the experience of some customer service, and can roll into that as their focused role.
So it has to be very, not necessarily client focused and working with the clients, but in understanding them, knowing how they're using the software, how we're communicating with them, all of those elements. I mean, I think that person has to really have a sense, finger on the pulse of what is important to them and what they're aware of.
I think it's that mix of strategic but having the technical knowledge, because you have to take feedback from users and different systems, which we'll talk about. You have to look at the strategy of the value of what you're providing, and some of the things we've talked about in the past of, how do you understand the pain index of different features and really be able to think of this from a critical standpoint, but then have some technical knowledge to understand, how is that going to translate into product development and what we do as a company. And then even into the managerial side of dealing with a customer service team and making sure that they're managed right. So there's definitely a lot of pieces, and like any high level role, you need multiple of those skill sets to come together to really truly be effective.
And that was I was going to say, kind of multiple skill sets that are needed to be a good fit for
100%.
This role.
The next is really, when you look at this, who owns it? You'll look at a job description, but some of the things that you want to define are also what are the systems and the metrics that we're looking at. So from a system standpoint, obviously things like analytics, a CRM, are you capturing customer information and making it easy to be able to communicate with them, which ties into like automation so that you can do automated messaging to customers, your documentation platform, so that you have documentation on your software and the tours and things like that, but that might tie into a ticketing system that also has documentation, so you really need a ticketing system, and then things like live chat. And so all of these are systems that this person is really going to need to be able to implement, integrate, and leverage the data and information within them to appropriately impact product roadmap and customer service and all of those other pieces.
Yeah.
So really getting someone that understands these systems, have used them before, and has experience knowing which the best ones are. And then metrics we talked about before, but for this person, you obviously want to start with some major objectives. Maybe it is that NPS score, Net Promoter Score, or it's something else that they're really driving towards as part of their role. But then underneath that, things that you're tracking is success metrics for their position and their team. Yeah. And we really want to define that is that, we talked about metrics for analytics, what we want to track. The opposite side of that is the metrics for the team to rally around and really look at, this is what we have to pay attention to on a regular basis, and what we need to evaluate to say, okay, here are things that we need to focus on changing. If our ticket count is really high or our issue resolution rate is really low, that's the job for that person that's owning this to say, we have an issue here that we're not meeting the benchmark that we want. So now I've got to rally the team around how do we impact that metric.
Yeah.
So very important piece.
And again, we're kind of circling back to a number of things that we've talked a little bit to.
Yeah.
I think this is an episode where we start to pull a lot of these things and make each of these things we've talked about independently kind of work together and start to analyze some of this stuff.
Well, I think this episode is a lot about taking, like you're saying, what we talked about in the past, but putting someone in charge of that, because as a team it's hard to do that, and really figuring out how do you put that person in charge, build a team around them, and then give them these tools to be able to be successful.
Yeah.
The other thing that we look at, and one of the things we do with our clients, is really looking at CX retention meetings. So having some sort of weekly schedule where you go in and the meeting is all about retention. And so you've got your leadership position that's running that meeting and facilitating it, but you're bringing people in from sales, marketing, customer service, and product development to be part of the discussion process. And so the agenda looks a lot like, typically what we ask people to do is come in and talk about a positive experience, whether with a user, an employee, or themselves. Again, just kind of setting the mindset for the meeting, getting people comfortable with talking so that you can start it out on the right foot. Then do a critical numbers review. So obviously we go in and we really look at, where is our Net Promoter Score? Where are we on ticket resolutions? And so if we've got certain KPIs, we want to know where are we and what is our goal number, and use that as an analysis piece to potentially look for issues that we have. And then really telling customer success and failure headlines, so things that are going really well for customers and things that are going really bad, and asking everybody in the room to say, give us some headlines of what's going on good and bad with our customers. And both the critical numbers review and this success failure headlines piece drives into our issues list. And so what we like to do is create a nice list of things that we pull out from the headlines and critical numbers, and then rank those on priority so we understand what the team should focus on. So you'd have an issues list where maybe at the top level, users are getting a critical error message in the report section. This is something that's super important, we can't have happening, but at the bottom there's no email sent when new users are added. It might be something that during the failure headlines, we got a response from a customer that said, I didn't know I got added to this. And that gets added to the list, but maybe it's not a high priority. And so really, again, it's about doing that, and every week coming in and basically saying, let's help develop this list. Then we're going to go through this list and prioritize and add responsibility and say, Joe, we need you to set up an email. Sam, we need you to fix this critical error. And that becomes part of the bug fixing or roadmap process that you have in your agile development.
And this goes to now the accountability piece that this whole episode is about, is even though you're going to have someone who's that czar that's going to be leading this effort, there are going to be different elements in here that are going to be passed along, so the greater team can be working on this, so that person isn't just doing everything. They're just overseeing and ensuring that all these things are being addressed.
And really at the end, I mean, speaking to accountability, the last part of this weekly meeting would be accountability review, making sure you're going through this list and something is assigned to everybody. And whether that means, hey, we can push this till next week, or we need to get this solved right away, we want to have accountability, and then a meeting score. And this is something we do across everything, but making sure that you have some sort of metric of how well the meeting was. The one that we like to use is, 3 yeses. Was everybody candid? Did we talk about everything that we needed to be? And do we have complete accountability for what happens next? And so really walking out of this meeting every week, if you have a retention czar, someone that's owning this, they have a team of people, your customer service, your marketing, sales, and product development, and you're working through these issues that you're seeing, and you're assigning accountability and getting them checked off, you're going to see progressive improvement in retention.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here to talk about, and why it's so important to have a leader and someone that can facilitate this and manage it and hold people accountable and constantly be moving through these retention challenges.
Yeah. And I going back to the meeting score, what we use, I love that one. We used to do a score on the scale 1 to 10, and everyone kind of, I don't know, I never feel all that great about the score that I gave. Yeah. So, but this one that we've been using is great. It's a yes or no. Was there complete candor? What's the second one?
Everything discussed.
Everything discussed, and then accountability.
Yep.
So yes or no's. And what I've noticed in our meetings since we've been doing that for a couple months now is a lot of times, if I haven't been completely candid, I'll say, well, I can't give myself a yes. So you know what, Andy? I think we need to talk a little bit more about this.
Right.
And then right there, we may say, okay, well, let's put that on for next week's meeting. And so more has come out. I think it's been more constructive.
Yeah.
And again, having those 3 yes or no check boxes for me has been beneficial.
Yeah.
So that's one that I think works really well.
And it's like everything that we've said in all of our series is building systems around what we do, whether that's the brainstorming process, whether that's evaluating features, that's developing your product roadmap, it's analyzing data, it's, creating leadership and accountability and a team and improving retention. All this stuff is not about just in monthly company meetings saying, hey guys, we've got to, make sure we improve retention. That doesn't get us anywhere. What we have to do is start leveraging some of these tactics and put some of these things in place to make major movement on all of this stuff. And I do think that what we're talking about today, having a leader, having this consistency, and developing a system for accountability and prioritization is just so important to that retention goal that you're trying to achieve. So big piece. So good information. Next week, we're talking about, let's see, dear friend, I would like to discuss our correspondence.
Sounds like it came from a Nigerian prince.
Yeah, that, or, it's George Washington reaching out to Franklin, whatever it might be. But really, this is all about communication. So, we've talked about a lot of things, but one of the most important is going to be, how do you communicate? How often do you communicate? How is that triggered and managed with your users? So obviously it's a relationship and one that you want to keep, bear hug around it. And so if we're going to do that, we have to have some conversation, even if it's, close, because you're bear hugging, so you have to whisper in someone's ear. Whatever the correspondence approach is, we've got to do it, right?
The Bear Hug Show.
The Bear Hug Show. That's where we're headed, because I keep bringing it up. And I'm not going to stop either. So we're just going to keep talking about bear hugs. But that's our show for today. Check out the past episodes. Make sure you assign your chief retention officer or retention czar within your company. And if you need more information on how we run these retention meetings that we talked about, give us a call. It's something that we do with clients, and it's really powerful to have a process to go through to do that well. And so feel free to reach out to us about that, and check us out next week on Wednesday to talk about communication.
We will see you next time, guys. Thanks for joining.
See y'all.